Sometimes the scariest moments in life don't come from ghosts or shadows, but from real people and their choices. A small plane journey can feel routine, just a trip in the sky. But what happens when pride, prejudice, and authority collide thousands of feet above the ground? One simple seat refusal sets off a chain of tension, forcing everyone on board to face the truth of what respect and justice really mean. The pilot's voice, calm yet heavy, carries a weight no one expects, and when it lands, the whole plane falls silent. Now let's begin the story. Before we continue, let us know in the comments where you are watching from today and what time you are currently watching this video. If you enjoy stories like this, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more of the airport buzz with the usual rush of footsteps, rolling suitcases, and the muffled voices of people juggling phone calls while hurrying to their gates. Flight 227 to Dallas was boarding, and passengers lined up in a crooked queue, shifting impatiently as the gate agent scanned tickets one by one. Angela Carter clutched her boarding pass tightly, tapping her heel against the carpeted floor. She had always hated airports, too crowded, too noisy, and too full of people who, in her opinion, had no manners. She adjusted her pearl necklace, smoothed down her cream-colored skirt, and eyed the crowd. Her seat was near the front, a window seat, and she expected the flight to be quick and uneventful. But just ahead of her, in the same boarding group, was a tall man with dark skin, broad shoulders, and a quiet presence. He wore a navy suit and carried nothing but a slim leather briefcase. His steps were calm, his eyes focused straight ahead, unlike Angela's darting gaze. The man was Marcus Reed, a software consultant flying out for a last-minute business meeting. To him, the trip was routine. He'd done it dozens of times. Yet even routine moments had ways of turning into something else. Angela noticed him again when they reached the jet bridge. She frowned, muttering under her breath. Of course. She didn't know why his presence irritated her. It simply did. She believed people like her deserved a certain order, a certain distance. Inside the plane, the air smelled faintly of coffee and recycled air. Flight attendants guided passengers down the narrow aisle, pointing to seat numbers. Angela stopped abruptly when she realized where Marcus was heading. Row 6, right next to her. Her chest tightened. No, 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 she whispered. Marcus slid his briefcase neatly into the overhead compartment, ducked slightly, and stepped into the aisle seat beside hers. His movements were smooth, polite, almost invisible in their efficiency. He offered a brief nod to her as he sat. Angela froze, her hand gripping the armrest of the empty window seat. Her eyes narrowed, and she shook her head firmly. "Excuse me," she said loudly, turning to the flight attendant nearby. "This isn't going to work. I cannot sit here." The young flight attendant, Emily, blinked. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Is there a problem with the seat?" Angela jabbed a finger toward Marcus, without looking directly at him. "Yes, there is. I will not sit next to him." A hush fell over surrounding rows. Passengers glanced up from their phones, their books, their half-finished conversations. Marcus stayed silent, his face unreadable, his posture steady. Emily hesitated, her training urging her to stay professional. "Ma'am, this is your assigned seat. If you like, I can check for another available spot after boarding finishes. But for now, we need you to take your seat so we can depart on time." Angela crossed her arms. "No, you don't understand. I will not sit next to this man. Find me another seat now." Her voice rose, cutting to the hum of settling passengers. A baby started crying a few rows back. Someone muttered, "Are you serious right now?" Marcus kept his eyes forward, jaw clenched but calm. He wasn't surprised. He had faced this sort of thing before, though never this public, never this loud. His instincts told him to remain quiet, let the airline staff handle it. But silence carried its own weight, and he could feel every pair of eyes on him. Emily tried again, her tone firmer. "Ma'am, please, you're holding up the boarding process. Take your seat, and I'll do my best to help after we're airborne." Angela's lips tightened into a thin line. "I said no. If you force me to sit here, I'll file a complaint. I'll speak to your supervisor. This is unacceptable." The tension spread like smoke. Passengers whispered, their faces turning between Angela, Marcus, and the crew. The line in the aisle slowed to a crawl, people pressing against their luggage, waiting for the scene to end. From the cockpit, the pilot, Captain David Walker, received word of the disturbance. He was a veteran with 25 years of flying behind him, calm, steady, respected by his crew. But he knew when something in the cabin threatened not just the schedule, but the very spirit of the flight. It was his responsibility to address it. He stepped out, tall in his crisp uniform, his captain's hat tucked under one arm. The murmurs quieted instantly at his presence. "What seems to be the issue here?" His voice was measured, deep, but it carried authority. Angela straightened, eager to have an ally. "Captain, thank goodness. There's been a mistake. I can't sit here. I need another seat. Now." Walker's eyes moved from her to Marcus, who gave a small nod of acknowledgement but said nothing. Then back to Angela. "And why exactly can't you sit here?" She shifted, suddenly aware of the stairs. It's not comfortable for me." I don't want to sit next to him. The captain didn't flinch. He had heard many complaints over the years. Seats too small, food too bland, turbulence too rough. But this one sat heavier. Marcus met his gaze briefly. No words, just a look that said he didn't need defending, yet he wasn't going to fight either. Walker exhaled slowly. Ma'am, every passenger on this plane has the same right to their seat. There is no mistake. You will take your seat now, so we can depart. Angela's cheeks flushed red. You can't be serious. Oh, I'm very serious, Walker replied. His calm tone carried steel. The silence in the cabin grew taut, stretched in like a string about to snap. No one moved. No one dared. Angela's fingers trembled as she clutched her handbag, her body stiff with defiance. But beneath that defiance was something else, something colder, creeping in her stomach. The way the captain's eyes locked on her, the way the plane's entire attention pinned her to the spot. She realized, for the first time, she was no longer in control of the situation. Her heart thudded, and a strange unease curled through her chest. And then, the captain leaned closer, his voice lowering so only those nearby could hear. His words were calm, deliberate, and sharp enough to slice through her stubbornness. What he said next left Angela gripping the armrest, her breath caught in her throat, her certainty shaking. The cabin waited, silent, the air growing heavier by the second. Captain Walker stood firmly in the narrow aisle, his tall frame almost filling the space. His calm face didn't reveal much, but his voice carried weight. He looked at Angela directly, his tone low and steady. Ma'am, let me make this very clear, he said. Every seat on this plane is equal. The person sitting beside you has the same right to fly as you do. If you cannot accept that, you may deplane right now. But this flight will not move until you decide. Angela froze, stunned that the captain had spoken so bluntly. For years, she was used to getting her way with complaints and demands. Most staff, in restaurants, hotels, or anywhere else, bent over backwards to avoid confrontation. But here, at 30,000 feet soon to come, the rules were different. She opened her mouth, ready to argue again, but the intensity in the captain's eyes stopped her. The passengers around her leaned in slightly, waiting. Some even held their phones up, secretly recording. She noticed a red blinking light from one device 2 rows back and realized this wasn't just a private dispute anymore. This was quickly becoming a spectacle. Her cheeks flushed hot, her throat tightening. She gripped her purse harder. Marcus shifted slightly in his seat, but remained silent. His posture was calm, shoulders squared, eyes still forward. He wasn't here to entertain drama. He just wanted to get to Dallas. But deep down, he felt a familiar ache, the kind of tiredness that came from being judged before he ever spoke a word. The baby in the back cried again, and the flight attendant Emily cleared her throat. Captain, she said gently, we still have 12 passengers to seat. We're behind schedule. Walker nodded once, but his eyes never left Angela. Then let's settle this quickly. Angela tried to force a laugh, as if brushing it off. You're really making a scene over this? I just asked for another seat. The captain's voice sharpened. No, ma'am. You made a demand based on who your neighbor is. That's not just a seating request. That's a choice you made about someone's worth. And I won't let this plane take off under that kind of division. The words hit her harder than she expected. Division. Worth. Her mouth went dry. A man across the aisle spoke up, his tone annoyed. Lady, just sit down already. We all have places to be. Another passenger chimed in. Yeah, you're holding up the whole flight. Angela's heart raced as whispers rippled around her. For the first time, she realized crowd wasn't on her side. The energy pressing in from every angle was suffocating. She glanced at Marcus, who hadn't said a single word. His calmness unsettled her even more. Why wasn't he defending himself? Why wasn't he reacting? The silence felt like judgment all on its own. She swallowed hard, her hand trembling as she touched the edge of the seat. For a second, it seemed like she would finally sit down. But pride surged back. Her voice came out sharper than she meant. I have rights too, you know. I shouldn't be forced into something that makes me uncomfortable. Captain Walker's eyes narrowed slightly. His voice dropped even lower, firm enough that Angela felt each word hit her chest. Ma'am, let me remind you of something. Comfort does not override respect. If you believe your discomfort gives you power to strip another person's dignity, you are mistaken. You have 2 choices. Take your seat, or I will have you escorted off this aircraft right now. The cabin went still. Even the crying baby seemed to quiet, as though sensing the tension. Angela's breath came shallow, her thoughts racing. Being escorted off a plane, that would be humiliating, especially with cameras recording. Her friends, her co-workers, maybe even the news could see this. The flight attendant, Emily, stepped closer, her voice softer. Ma'am, please, just take your seat. We'll be in Dallas in a little over 2 hours. That's all. Angela's lips trembled. She lowered herself slowly into the window seat, her movement stiff and reluctant. Her knees brushed against the seat in front of her. Her hands shook as she buckled the belt. Captain Walker studied her for a moment, then gave a small nod. Good. Thank you. He glanced at Marcus. Sir, thank you for your patience. Marcus gave a respectful nod back. No problem, Captain. With that, Walker returned to the cockpit. Emily moved down the aisle, ushering the rest of the passengers into their seats. The cabins but slowly returned. Voices murmured, bags shuffled, overhead bins slammed shut. But the mood wasn't the same. The air still carried tension, like smoke after fire. Angela turned her face to the window, avoiding eye contact with anyone. Her pulse still pounded in her ears. She could feel the stares even if she didn't look. Her body trembled, though she tried to hide it by pressing her hands flat against her lap. Marcus sat quietly beside her, his expression neutral, but his mind was restless. He thought of his daughter at home, 12 years old, who often asked him why people looked at her differently at school. He thought of the promise he'd made to her, that he would never let bitterness win, that he would keep showing her strength through calmness. As the plane pushed back on the gate, Angela shifted uncomfortably. Her seatbelt felt too tight, the air too warm. The captain's words echoed in her head. Comfort does not override respect. She clenched her jaw, trying to shake it off, but the sentence dug deeper each time she repeated it. The engines roared, vibrating through the floor. The plane taxied down the runway, and the force of acceleration pressed everyone into their seats. As they lifted into the sky, Angela's stomach churned. Flying usually gave her a small thrill, the view of the clouds, the idea of being far above the world. But now, she felt none of it. Only the heavy weight of being watched, judged, and silently condemned by those around her. The seatbelt sign dinged off. A few passengers immediately stood to stretch or use a restroom. Others whispered in hushed tones, glancing at her before quickly looking away. Angela dug her nails into her palm, anger and unease twisting inside her. She told herself she was a victim, that she had only asked for something simple. But a colder thought pushed against her excuses. What if she had misjudged this whole situation? Meanwhile, Marcus pulled out a folder from his briefcase, flipping through documents. His calm focus only made her feel smaller. Why wasn't he shaken? Why wasn't he the one embarrassed? The cabin seemed to shrink around her. Every sound, the click of seatbelts, the hiss of the air vents, the murmur of conversations, felt magnified, pressing against her. Her skin prickled, her chest tight. She reached for the call button above her head, her finger hovering over it. She wanted to demand water. Anything to break the silence, anything to give her a distraction. But she stopped herself. Drawing more attention now would only make things worse. Her hands dropped into her lap. She stared out the window, the clouds rolling past like silent judges. The captain's voice returned over the intercom, calm as ever, giving the flight time and weather update. To everyone else, it was routine. To Angela, each word carried a reminder of his authority, of how powerless she felt in front of him. And deep down, she knew the pilot hadn't said everything. The way he had looked at her, the sharpness in his eyes, suggested there was more, much more. For the rest of the flight, she couldn't shake the feeling that something else was coming. The plane cruised smoothly at 35,000 feet. But inside row 6, the atmosphere was anything but calm. Angela sat stiffly against the window, her arms folded tight across her chest. Every now and then, she shifted her legs, trying to look composed, though the tremor in her fingers betrayed her. She could still feel the sting of humiliation. The captain's words, the passenger's stares, the phone's recording, it all replayed in her mind like a cruel loop. She had never been put in her place so publicly, and the embarrassment gnawed at her like a slow burn. Beside her, Marcus remained composed, flipping through his notes with the ease of a man who had learned long ago not to let other people's opinions rattle him. His pen scratched softly against the paper as he jotted down figures. He gave no outward sign of anger, but inside, his thoughts circled like a current beneath calm waters. He remembered something his father used to say. You can't control how people see you, son, but you can control how you carry yourself. Marcus had lived by that for years. Still, no matter how calm he tried to stay, there was a weight in his chest, a reminder of how quickly the world could strip dignity away. The flight attendant Emily passed by with a beverage cart. Her eyes darted toward Angela and Marcus briefly before her polite smile returned. Can I get you something to drink? She asked. Marcus looked up. Just water, please. And for you, ma'am? Emily turned to Angela. Angela hesitated. She wanted to decline, but her throat was dry and her palms were sweating. I'll have a ginger ale. Emily poured the drinks carefully, setting them on the lower trays. Let me know if you need anything else. Angela took a quick sip, the cold fizz scratching her throat. But instead of comfort, it only deepened her unease. She felt exposed, every move she made under invisible scrutiny. She stole a glance at Marcus, who was sipping his water, eyes fixed on his papers. His calm demeanor only tightened the knot in her stomach. She wanted to speak, to say something sharp, but words tangled in her throat. What if he responded? What if he ignored her? Both possibilities felt unbearable. A sudden bump jolted the plane, and gasps rippled through the cabin. The overhead bins rattled as turbulence shook the aircraft. Angela gripped the armrest, her nails digging into the leather. Marcus calmly closed his folder, setting it on his lap. He glanced sideways at her panic-stricken grip. "It's just a little turbulence," he said, his voice even. "Nothing to worry about." Angela stiffened at his tone. It wasn't mocking, but it was steady in a way that made her feel small. She turned her eyes sharply back to the window, refusing to respond. The captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've hit a patch of rough air. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. We should be clear in about 10 minutes. The plane shook again, harder this time. A child squealed in the back, followed by the sound of a mother's soothing voice. Drinks rippled in plastic cups, and a few passengers muttered prayers under their breath. Angela's heart pounded. She hated turbulence. It always reminded her of being powerless, of being trapped in a metal tube with no control. Her breathing grew shallow, her fingers white against the armrest. She felt Marcus's voice again, calm, steady. "Take slow breaths. In through your nose, out through your mouth." She turned to glare at him, but the steadiness in his eyes caught her off guard. For a split second, she followed his advice. Her shoulders loosened, her breath evening out slightly. Then the pride returned, and she snapped her gaze back to window. "I don't need your help," she muttered. Marcus didn't reply. He leaned back, closing his eyes briefly, letting the rumble of turbulence pass like a storm. After several minutes, the shaking eased. The cabin grew quieter, the tension softening, though not disappearing entirely. The captain came back in the intercom, reassuring the passengers that smoother skies lay ahead. Angela exhaled shakily. She hated that she had felt a moment of relief from a man beside her. She hated that her composure had cracked at all. Across the aisle, two college-age passengers whispered. One of them, a girl with headphones around her neck, shook her head. "Unbelievable," she murmured, not quietly enough. "Still can't believe she made a scene like that." Angela's ears burned. She lowered her head slightly, pretending to read the in-flight magazine. Her pride screamed inside her chest, but a colder fear crawled in too. She was becoming the villain of this flight, and she couldn't erase it. Marcus reopened his folder, his pen gliding across the page. He didn't look at her, didn't acknowledge the whispers, didn't even glance at the passengers around them. His silence felt louder than any words could. Angela wanted to shout, to defend herself, to explain that she hadn't meant the way it looked. But how could she explain? How could she undo the captain's words that carved into everyone's minds? The plane continued on, the hum of the engine steady once more. A flight attendant announced snack service, and small packets of pretzels and cookies made their way down the aisle. Angela took one, though her appetite was gone. As she fiddled with the packet, her thoughts spun. What if the man beside her told his version of the story later? What if it spread beyond the plane? What if people at the airport recognized her when they landed? The cameras, the recording, the blinking red light. The realization chilled her. This wasn't just humiliation for a plane full of strangers. This could follow her far beyond this flight. She shifted uneasily, her leg bouncing under the tray table. She dared a glance at Marcus, who was calmly underlining text on his page. She envied his composure, resented it even, but a sliver of curiosity slipped in. Who was this man, really? Why was he so calm in the face of her behavior? The thought unsettled her even more. The captain's voice returned again, this time softer, carrying an edge of warning. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be starting descent into Dallas in about 40 minutes. Please remain seated when instructed." Angela's stomach twisted. 40 minutes until they landed. 40 minutes until she had to face the looks of the passengers filing out, until she walked through the airport with a memory of what she had done following close behind. She told herself she didn't care. She told herself it was all exaggerated. But the truth pressed harder with every mile they traveled. Something had shifted, something she couldn't undo. And deep down, though she tried to bury it, she knew the captain wasn't finished. His announcement had shaken her, but it wasn't the end. The way he had spoken, the way his words cut sharp and true, promised more, and the thought of what more might come made her stomach churn in a way the turbulence never could. The hum of the engines filled the cabin as Flight 227 cut smoothly through the clouds. Outside, the sun dipped lower, painting streaks of orange and pink across the horizon. But inside row 6, the air still felt heavy. Angela shifted in her seat, her fingers tracing the cold metal of the buckle. She had been quiet for most of the flight, staring at the clouds, yet her thoughts were loud and relentless. Every whisper she imagined from the passengers, every glance she thought caught, pulled at her nerves. She remembered how confident she had been at the gate, how she walked in with her head high. Now, she felt stripped bare, her pride bruised in front of strangers she would never see again, but who had already judged her. Beside her, Marcus closed his folder at last. He set it neatly in the seat pocket, straightened, and exhaled. His calmness wasn't an act, It was years of practice, years of knowing when to speak and when silence said more. Still, he could feel the weight of what had happened earlier pressing against him. He didn't want to let bitterness grow, but he couldn't pretend her words had not cut deep. Angela's stomach growled quietly, though she ignored the unopened pretzel bag on her tray. Her pride refused to let her eat, yet the sound embarrassed her further, as though every small action she made only added to the attention she dreaded. The intercom crackled, and Captain Walker's voice came through again. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've begun our initial descent into Dallas. We'll be on the ground in approximately 25 minutes. Please fasten your seatbelts and return your trays to the upright position." A ripple of motion moved through the cabin as passengers obeyed. The flight attendants walked briskly down the aisle, checking belts and bins. Angela clicked her tray up with shaking hands. The snap of the lock echoed louder in her ears than it should have. She told herself she only had to endure a little longer. A few more minutes, and she would be free of the suffocating attention. She would walk off the plane, gather her things, and disappear into the airport crowd. But deep down, she knew it wouldn't be that simple. Emily, the flight attendant, paused by their row. "Everything okay here?" she asked, her tone professional but with a trace of tension. Marcus nodded politely. "All good." Angela forced a tight smile, though her throat felt dry. "Fine." Emily gave a small nod and moved on. The engines shifted pitch as the plane angled downward. The view from the window tilted, showing stretches of land below dotted with lights beginning to glow against the dusk. Angela's pulse quickened. Landings always made her uneasy, the dips, the jolts, the uncertain rattling of the cabin. But this time, the unease was doubled. It wasn't just the landing she feared. It was what waited after. Across the aisle, a passenger coughed, breaking the silence. Another tugged his jacket tighter, preparing for arrival. Life inside the cabin returned to routine, yet Angela felt anything but routine. Marcus finally turned his head slightly, his calm gaze falling on her. His voice was quiet, almost casual. "You know, flights are strange places. You're up here with people you've never met, close enough to hear them breathe. For a few hours, you're part of the same world. Then you land, and most likely, you'll never see them again." Angela's lips parted, but no words came out. She wasn't sure if he was lecturing her or simply stating a fact. Marcus continued, his tone steady. "Makes you think what kind of impression you leave in that short time." Her chest tightened. The words weren't angry, weren't sharp, but they carried weight. She wanted to defend herself, to say he didn't understand, but her throat locked up. The plane rattled as the wheels lowered. The flaps adjusted with a mechanical hum. Passengers braced, some holding armrests, some gripping the seat in front of them. The city lights glimmered closer, spreading out like a net of gold across the darkening earth. Angela clenched her teeth as the runway rushed toward them. The plane struck the ground with a hard thud, bouncing slightly before the brakes roared. The force shoved her forward against the belt, her heart hammering with each shake. Gasps and mutters filled the cabin, but soon the plane slowed, rolling smoothly down the runway. The captain's calm voice returned. "Welcome to Dallas, ladies and gentlemen. Please remain seated until we reach the gate." Applause broke out from a few rows back, a habit some passengers had after landings. But Angela felt no relief. Instead, her stomach twisted tighter. As the plane taxied, she noticed the same man who had recorded earlier was still holding his phone angled discreetly. Her breath hitched. Were they still recording? Were they waiting for her next move? Her palms dampened. Her thoughts raced ahead. What if a video went online? What if her face became recognizable? She could hear it now. The harsh headlines, the judgmental comments. She pictured her neighbors whispering, her co-workers sharing the clip, her friends quietly pulling away. She turned toward Marcus suddenly, her voice low and uneven. You're not going to say anything when we land, are you?" Marcus studied her for a moment. He didn't answer immediately. The silence stretched until it made her shift uncomfortably. Finally, he spoke, calm but firm. "I don't need to say anything," he replied. The truth spoke for itself back there. Her face burned. She wanted to argue, but deep down, she knew he was right. The plane slowed as it neared the gate. The seatbelt sign dinged off, and instantly, passengers stood, reaching for bags and jackets. The aisle filled with restless movement. Angela remained frozen, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She dreaded standing, dreaded the possibility of eyes following her every move. Marcus stood calmly, retrieving his briefcase with smooth efficiency. He didn't look rushed, didn't look flustered, just steady. The line of passengers shuffled forward, each step taking them closer to the open door. Emily and another attendant stood at the front, smiling politely, thanking each person as they left. Angela finally rose, her legs stiff, her chest tight. She clutched her bag close to her body, avoiding all eye contact. Every step down the aisle felt heavier, as though the weight of judgment clung to her shoulders. When she reached the door, she glanced up. Captain Walker was standing outside the cockpit, his expression calm but unreadable. His eyes met hers, and in that brief moment, she felt the ground shift again inside her chest. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The look alone was enough. Angela's steps faltered as she exited the plane, her body trembling despite the steady floor beneath her. For the first time in years, she realized she was afraid, not of flight, not of the turbulence, but of what might follow her after this moment. And somewhere deep down, she knew the pilot's role in this wasn't finished. The jet bridge was crowded as passengers hurried off the plane. Bags bumped against legs, voices filled a narrow space, and the line moved in fits and starts. Angela clutched her handbag tightly to her chest, her knuckles pale. She avoided every eye, staring down at the patterned carpet as though it could swallow her whole. Marcus walked just ahead of her, tall and composed, his briefcase swinging lightly at his side. He moved with quiet confidence, unaffected by the whispers that still clung to the air. Passengers glanced at him, some offering polite nods as if silently acknowledging his patience earlier. Angela felt those same eyes burning on her back, though she never looked up to confirm. Each step was heavy, like walking through thick mud. The echo of Captain Walker's sharp words replayed again and again in her mind. At the gate, the passengers spilled out into the terminal. Families regrouped, business travelers checked phones, and children tugged impatiently at parents' sleeves. The ordinary chaos of an airport surrounded them, but to Angela, it felt louder, brighter, and suffocating. She slowed her pace, hoping to slip away unseen. But as she turned toward the terminal seating area, she noticed something that froze her. Two young men who had been sitting near her row were huddled together, their phones out. On the screen of one, she caught a glimpse of herself, her face, her voice, her refusal. The video, they had posted it already. Her chest tightened. Her mouth went dry. She couldn't hear the rest of their conversation, but their quiet laughter, their nods, told her everything. This wasn't going to stay here. It was going to spread. Marcus noticed the hesitation in her steps. He glanced back briefly, but his face gave nothing away. He simply continued forward, disappearing into the crowd toward the baggage claim. Angela stood rooted for a moment, her mind spinning. Should she confront the men? Should she demand they delete it? Her heart thudded at the thought, but then another fear followed. What if they refused? What if more people were recording? Her hands trembled. She turned quickly and headed for the baggage carousel, weaving through the terminal crowd. The carousel clanked to life, suitcases tumbling onto the belt. People crowded the edge, watching carefully for their bags. Angela hung back, her eyes darting nervously around. Every person with a phone felt like a threat. Every glance felt sharper than usual. When her suitcase finally appeared, she lunged for it, nearly knocking into another passenger. The man frowned but said nothing, pulling back his own bag. Angela muttered a stiff sorry, without meeting his eyes. Her suitcase in hand, she made for the exit. But just as she reached the sliding doors that led out toward the taxis, her heart sank. Standing near the glass doors, greeting passengers with warm handshakes, was Captain Walker. Angela's chest tightened again. Of all the people to see as her final hurdle, it had to be him. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't even speaking much. He simply stood there, tall and calm, as though he was waiting for something or someone. She considered turning back, circling around another exit, but it was too late. His eyes met hers across the crowd. Her steps faltered. Her grip on the suitcase handle slick with sweat. She forced herself forward, head bowed slightly. Maybe if she moved quickly enough, he wouldn't say anything. But as she passed, his voice came low and steady, meant only for her. Think about the impression you left today, ma'am, because it's going to follow you further than you think. Her breath caught. She glanced at him, startled. His eyes weren't angry, but they carried a weight that struck deeper than anger, a weight of disappointment, of finality. She wanted to argue, to say he was exaggerating, that it wasn't as serious as he made it sound. But her throat locked, and all she managed was a shaky nod before pushing through the sliding doors. The cool evening air hit her face as she stepped outside. Cars honked, engines idled, and travelers rushed into waiting shuttles. But Angela barely noticed. Her mind was still trapped in the cabin, replaying every look, every whisper, every second of the confrontation. She hauled her suitcase into the back of a cab, sliding into the seat with trembling hands. Downtown, she muttered to the driver, barely audible. As the cab pulled away, Angela pressed her forehead to the glass, her reflection staring back at her in the dim light. She hardly recognized herself. The confident woman from earlier that day seemed like a stranger now, replaced by someone smaller, shaken, and afraid. She pulled out her phone, almost without thinking. Her hands shook as she scrolled through social media. At first, nothing unusual appeared. A few posts from friends, news updates, advertisements. Relief brushed her briefly. Maybe the video wasn't spreading yet. But then she froze. A headline popped up on her feed. Passenger refuses seatmate on flight 227. Pilot's response goes viral. Her heart plummeted. She tapped it with trembling fingers. The video opened, and there she was, frozen mid-gesture, pointing at Marcus. Her voice echoed from the small speaker. I will not sit next to him. Her stomach churned. The comments beneath scrolled endlessly. Unbelievable. Some people still think like this in 2025? Props to the pilot. Handled it perfectly. This lady should be banned from flying. Her vision blurred as tears welled in her eyes. She dropped the phone into her lap, pressing her hand over her mouth. The cab driver glanced at her in the rearview mirror. You okay, ma'am? He asked. Angela quickly wiped her face. I'm fine, she lied, her voice tight. But she wasn't fine. She knew it. Deep down, she felt the truth clawing at her. Her life had just changed in a way she couldn't control. The cab weaved through Dallas streets, neon signs flashing by, people laughing on sidewalks, cars rushing past. The world outside looked normal, but Angela's world was unraveling. Her phone buzzed. A message from her coworker lit up the screen. Is this you in the video? Her chest tightened so hard it hurt. She didn't reply. She couldn't. She stared at the screen until it dimmed, her reflection faint in the black glass. And in that reflection, she saw not the woman she thought she was, but the woman everyone else now believed her to be. And she couldn't shake the feeling that the pilot's words, calm and sharp, would keep echoing long after this night was over. The cab pulled into the downtown hotel district, neon lights casting sharp reflections across the wet pavement. Angela sat stiffly in the back seat, her suitcase balanced beside her. Her phone buzzed again and again, each vibration like a drumbeat against her nerves. She refused to look at it. The driver slowed in front of her hotel. Here we are, ma'am, he said, glancing back to the mirror. Angela nodded quickly, fumbling for cash. She handed it over without counting, eager to escape the curious eyes she thought she saw in the glass. Dragging her suitcase behind her, she hurried through the lobby, her heels clicking too loud on the polished floor. The receptionist greeted her with a smile, but Angela barely returned it. She signed in, grabbed the key card, and nearly ran for the elevators. Inside, she pressed a button for her floor with trembling fingers. The doors closed, sealing her into the small box of mirrors. Her reflection stared back from every angle, pale and drawn. When the elevator dinged at her floor, she rushed down the hall and unlocked her room. The moment the door shut behind her, she let out a shaky breath. She set the suitcase down and sank onto the edge of the bed. For a brief moment, the silence felt like safety, but then her phone buzzed again. She stared at it lying on the bedspread. Dozens of notifications lit the screen, messages, emails, tags. She picked it up reluctantly and opened her inbox. Her heart sank. Co-workers, friends, even distant relatives had seen the video already. Some messages were blunt. Why would you say that? Others were harsher. This is disgusting. A few offered defense, but even those rang hollow. Angela's hands shook as she set the phone aside. She pressed her palms against her eyes, willing the world to disappear. But it didn't. The video was out there, spreading like wildfire. Across town, Marcus had checked into his own hotel, a simple business day. He placed his briefcase on the desk, loosened his tie, and sat by the window. Unlike Angela, he didn't check his phone immediately. He simply sat, staring at the skyline. The city lights glimmered, steady and indifferent to the drama of one plane ride. When he finally did open his phone, he found his messages flooded too. Friends had seen the video. Many congratulated him for keeping calm. Some called him a role model. Others asked how he stayed so composed. He read each one quietly, then set the phone down. He wasn't proud of being in that video. He hadn't asked for it. To him, it wasn't a moment of triumph. It was a reminder of how far things still had to go. The next morning, Angela woke early, though she had hardly slept. Dark circles framed her eyes, and her hair was a tangled mess. She sat on the bed with her phone in hand, scrolling through headlines. The story was everywhere now. News outlets had picked it up. Commentators were debating it. Her face was in every thumbnail. She groaned and threw the phone onto the bed. Her chest ached. She needed coffee, maybe fresh air, something to clear her mind. She dressed quickly and took the elevator down to the lobby. But the moment she stepped outside, her stomach dropped. A young man across the street had his phone raised, angled at her. Was he recording her? Watching her? She couldn't tell. She ducked her head and hurried down the sidewalk, her pulse racing. Inside a cafe, she ordered coffee with shaking voice. The barista gave her a polite smile, but Angela imagined judgment in her eyes. She took the cup and sat by the window, keeping her head low. Every person around her felt like a potential accuser. Meanwhile, Marcus was preparing for his meeting. He had his presentation slides ready, his notes in order. Yet even as he adjusted his tie in the mirror, he thought of the flight again. He thought of Angela's face when the captain spoke, of the silence that followed. He shook his head and told himself to focus. Work came first. Back at the cafe, Angela overheard two women at a nearby table. They were scrolling through their phones, giggling. Did you see that plane video? One whispered. Oh my God, yes. The pilot was amazing. And the woman, wow, imagine being her right now. Angela froze. Heat rushed up her neck. She couldn't be sure if they recognized her or if it was just coincidence. Either way, it was too much. She grabbed her bag and bolted, leaving her half-drunk coffee behind. Back in her hotel room, she paced restlessly. Her chest rose and fell with shallow breaths. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a new notification. Her company had sent an email. With trembling hands, she opened it. The words blurred for a moment before her eyes focused. In light of recent events, we are placing you on temporary leave pending review. Her knees gave out. She sank to the floor, her phone clattering beside her. The reality crashed over her. This wasn't just embarrassment anymore. It was her job, her reputation, her life unraveling thread by thread. She buried her face in her hands, her body trembling. Meanwhile, Marcus sat across from a boardroom table, speaking with calm authority as he outlined his proposal. The executives nodded, taking notes, impressed not only by his plan but by his composure. He didn't mention the flight. He didn't need to. His actions had already spoken louder than any story he could tell. As Angela lay curled on the floor of her hotel room, her phone buzzed once more. This time, it wasn't a coworker or a friend. It was an unknown number. She hesitated, then answered with shaking voice. "Hello." A calm, familiar tone replied. "This is Captain Walker." Her heart stopped. "I think you and I need to have a conversation," he said. The line went quiet, heavy with meaning. Angela's breath caught, her hand trembling against the phone. She didn't know why the pilot was calling, or what he wanted to say, but a chill ran through her body at the thought of hearing more from him, because she knew he hadn't said everything on that plane. Not yet. Angela sat frozen with the phone pressed to her ear, her chest tightening. The captain's voice on the other end was calm, steady, almost too steady. "Angela," he continued, "I didn't want to embarrass you further that day, but there are things you should know. What you said didn't just stay on that plane. You understand that now, don't you?" Her throat went dry. I didn't mean for all this to happen," she whispered. "Intentions don't erase actions," Captain Walker replied firmly. "But I'm not calling a lecture. I'm calling because I want to meet you. Face to face." Angela's stomach flipped. "Meet me? Why?" "Because you need to hear the full picture," he said. "And because you need to understand what happens next." Before she could respond, the line went dead. Angela lowered the phone slowly, her pulse hammering in her ears. What did he mean, what happens next? She paced the hotel room in circles, the walls suddenly feeling smaller, the air too heavy. Meeting the captain felt dangerous, but ignoring him felt worse. She knew he wasn't threatening her, at least not outright. Still, his words carried weight, the kind that left her shaking. After a long pause, she sat at the desk, opened her laptop, and searched his name, Captain David Walker. Dozens of results appeared. A respected pilot with decades of service, known for his professionalism. Articles praised him as a calm voice in chaos, for his role in landing planes safely during emergencies. Angela's chest tightened further. This was no ordinary man. This was someone people trusted, someone whose voice carried authority. Hours later, Angela received a text. It was from the same number. "Lobby, 8 p.m. Be there." She stared at it, heart thudding. Part of her wanted to ignore it, to lock herself in the room and never leave. But another part whispered that hiding had only made things worse. When the time came, she found herself in the lobby, her nerves on edge. The place buzzed with chatter from travelers and business people, but Angela only noticed a tall figure by the window. Captain Walker. He stood with his hands folded behind his back, his posture upright, his uniform crisp even though he wasn't on duty. His eyes found hers the moment she stepped forward. "Angela," he greeted, his tone even. "Captain," she murmured, her voice thin. "Let's walk," he said, leading her toward the exit without waiting for her answer. They stepped into the cool evening air, city lights flickering against the wet streets. The noise of traffic surrounded them, but Angela felt like she was moving through a tunnel where only his voice carried. "You know why I spoke up that day?" he asked suddenly. She swallowed. "Because I embarrassed myself?" He stopped walking, turned to face her directly. "No, because silence in moments like that gives permission for things to stay the same. And I don't give permission for that. Not on my plane." Angela looked away, shame burning her cheeks. The captain's tone softened slightly. "But what you don't see, Angela, is the chain reaction. That flight wasn't just a trip from Dallas to Chicago. That cabin was full of people, business leaders, students, even a journalist. You weren't just talking to one man. You were talking to an entire room. And now the entire country is listening." Her heart dropped. I didn't think it would go this far." "Of course not. People rarely do," he said, his eyes steady on her. "But it has. And now it's not just about you. It's about what comes after." Angela's breath hitched. "What comes after?" The captain didn't answer right away. Instead, he led her into a quiet side street, away from the main flow of people. The dim streetlight stretched shadows across the pavement, adding weight to the silence. Finally, he spoke again. Marcus handled himself with dignity. He didn't retaliate, didn't make a scene. But he could have, and no one would have blamed him. Instead, he gave everyone an example of strength. That's why people are rallying around him. And that's why they're turning on you. Angela's knees felt weak. I know. I've seen the messages. I lost my job this morning. He nodded slowly, as if unsurprised. That's the beginning. But jobs can be replaced. Reputations? Those follow you. Everywhere. Her voice cracked. So what am I supposed to do? The captain studied her face for a long moment. Then he leaned slightly closer, his words low but sharp. You're going to have to decide if you want to keep running, or if you're willing to face what you've set in motion. Angela's chest rose and fell rapidly. She didn't know what he expected from her, and his calmness only made her more uneasy. Then he added, and don't think Marcus is the only one watching. Others are paying attention now. People you don't even know. Angela's blood ran cold. She gripped the strap of her bag tighter, her hands trembling. Why are you telling me this? Why me? The captain's eyes hardened. Because whether you like it or not, your face is part of the story now. And stories have consequences. For a moment, the world around Angela seemed to shrink. The sound of traffic faded. All she could hear was her own pulse and the captain's words echoing in her head. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away, his figure disappearing into the crowd of the main street. Angela stood frozen, breath shallow, heart pounding. She didn't chase him. She couldn't. When she finally stumbled back to the hotel, her thoughts spun like a storm. She had no idea what tomorrow would bring, only that the ground beneath her feet was shifting, and there was no way to stop it. In his own hotel room across town, Marcus closed his laptop after finishing another round of emails. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. The world saw him as calm, composed, unshaken. But inside, he wrestled with thoughts of that flight and everything since. For him, it wasn't just a viral video. It was a reminder that no matter how far he went, no matter how professional he became, prejudice could still follow him through airport gates and cabin aisles. But unlike Angela, Marcus didn't feel trapped. He felt determined. If people were watching, then he would give them something worth watching, a steady example of strength, not bitterness. Angela, meanwhile, sat on the edge of her bed, phone in hand, staring at the endless flood of comments. Each one felt like a stone added to the weight pressing down on her. And yet, the captain's words repeated in her mind. You'll have to decide if you want to keep running. Or face it, she didn't know which choice she could live with. All she knew was that time was running out. Angela didn't sleep that night. She tossed and turned, her mind replaying every word Captain Walker had spoken. His calm voice, his sharp warning, the way he walked away without looking back. It all felt heavier than the hundreds of angry comments online. By morning, her eyes were swollen and her body ached with exhaustion. But the day wasn't about to give her peace. Her phone buzzed nonstop with calls from unknown numbers and news outlets demanding statements. She silenced it, but the messages kept pouring in. At breakfast in the hotel restaurant, she felt people's eyes on her. A couple across the room whispered, glancing her way. A man scrolled through his phone, then lifted his gaze and shook his head in quiet disapproval. Angela shrank into her seat, unable to eat. The weight of public shame was suffocating. Meanwhile, across the city, Marcus prepared for his day. He wasn't hiding in a hotel. Instead, he walked into a community center, where a group of young people were waiting. The viral video had thrust him into the spotlight, and now people wanted to hear from him directly. Marcus, man, you handled that flight with real calm, a teenager said, eyes wide. How'd you keep from snapping? Marcus smiled faintly, because snapping would have proved her point. Dignity doesn't mean silence, but it does mean control. You can't let anger write your story. The room nodded in agreement. The young people leaned forward, hungry for guidance. Marcus spoke about discipline, resilience, and holding your head high in moments of disrespect. His words weren't rehearsed, but they carried the weight of lived experience. Back at the hotel, Angela scrolled through another article. The headline made her stomach sink. Passengers outburst sparks debate on race and air travel. Airlines respond. She clicked, reading with trembling hands. Several major airlines were quoted, promising stricter policies against discrimination on board. A photo of Marcus filled half the page, his calm expression making him look almost heroic. Beside it, blurred and grainy, was a screenshot of Angela mid-argument, her face twisted in anger. The contrast was damning. Angela slammed the laptop shut, fighting back tears. She thought about packing her bags and fleeing the city. But where would she go? The internet had no borders. Her face was everywhere. As she sat in despair, a knock came at the door. Her pulse spiked. Cautiously, she opened it. A hotel staff member stood there, holding a folded piece of paper. Ma'am, this was left for you at the front desk, he said politely. Angela took it with shaking hands. The note was simple, typed in neat black letters. Meet me at the park near Fifth Avenue. Noon. Don't be late. No signature. Her stomach twisted. Was it Captain Walker again? Or Marcus? Or someone else entirely? The uncertainty made her hands clammy. Against her better judgment, she went. The park was bustling with families, joggers, and street vendors. Angela scanned the area nervously, clutching her purse. Then she saw him, Marcus, sitting on a bench, calm as ever, watching pigeons scatter across the pavement. She froze, her heart racing. He looked up, meeting her eyes. For a moment, neither moved. Finally, Marcus gestured to the empty space beside him. Sit. Angela's legs felt heavy, but she obeyed, lowering herself onto the bench. The air between them was thick with tension. You came, Marcus said quietly. I didn't know if I should, she admitted, her voice cracking. You should, he replied, still looking straight ahead. Because running won't change anything. Angela twisted her fingers in her lap. I never wanted it to go this far. I don't know, angry, frustrated. It came out wrong. Marcus finally turned to face her, his gaze steady. No, it came out exactly how you felt. That's the problem. Her chest tightened. I'm not here to drag you, Marcus continued, his tone calm but firm. I'm here because this isn't just about you and me. It's about everyone watching. People saw that video, and they saw two options, anger or control. You chose one. I chose the other. And now the world is deciding which side matters more. Angela felt tears sting her eyes. So what happens to me now? Am I just finished? Marcus didn't answer immediately. He leaned back, letting out a slow breath. That depends on you. You can spend the rest of your life hiding from this, or you can own it, not just with words, with action. Angela shook her head. People don't want me to own it. They want me erased. That's because right now, you've given them nothing else to see, Marcus said, his voice low but sharp. But you still have a choice. Angela turned her face away, ashamed. The noise of children playing nearby filled the silence. After a long pause, Marcus stood. I didn't come here for your apology. I came here to tell you the same thing I tell those kids at the center. Your story isn't just yours anymore. It belongs to everyone who saw it. So ask yourself, what do you want them to remember? With that, he walked away, leaving Angela trembling on the bench. She sat frozen, watching him disappear into the crowd. His words echoed in her mind, louder than the chatter of the park, louder than the laughter of children or the screech of birds. For the first time, Angela realized the depth of what she had unleashed. It wasn't just a mistake caught on video. It was a story shaping how people saw her, Marcus, and even themselves. And there was no escaping it. As the sun dipped lower, Angela rose slowly, her legs weak. She walked back toward the hotel, unsure if she was walking towards something or away from everything. Across town, Marcus entered the community center again. Reporters had gathered now, cameras flashing, questions flying. Marcus, what's next for you after the incident? Do you plan to press charges? Has the airline reached out to you personally? Marcus held up a hand, steadying the room. This isn't about lawsuits or headlines, he said clearly. This is about who we choose to be when faced with disrespect. I'm not here to tear anyone down. I'm here to lift people up. The crowd erupted in applause. Angela watched the coverage that night from her hotel room, her heart heavy. Marcus was rising, becoming more than just a man on a flight. He was turning into a voice, a symbol, and she was a shadow in his story. But somewhere inside her, a small voice whispered, you still have a choice. She didn't know what that choice would look like yet. All she knew was that time was closing in, and the world was still watching. The night after Marcus's speech at the community center, Angela sat by the window of her hotel room, staring at the city lights. She hadn't left the room since her meeting with him at the park. His words still clung to her, haunting her, daring her to face herself. All day, she had ignored calls from her family, her employer, and a flood of reporters. Her life outside those 4 hotel walls felt like it had already crumbled. But now, sitting in the glow of the city, she realized she couldn't stay hidden forever. The story wasn't fading, it was growing. The video was still climbing in views. Marcus's interviews were spreading, and her name had become shorthand for ignorance. Everywhere, people were talking about her, but nobody was talking to her. She decided that had to change. Angela picked up her phone, her hand trembling. She dialed a number she had found earlier in a news article, the airline's public relations office. Hello, this is Delta Communications. A firm voice answered. This is Angela Price, she said, her throat dry, the passenger from the flight. I want to speak publicly, not to defend myself, to take responsibility. The line went silent for a moment. Then the voice returned, softer this time. We'll arrange it. Tomorrow. Angela hung up, her chest pounding. The next day, a press conference was set up in a modest hall near the airport. Reporters filled the room, cameras lined the back wall, and whispers buzzed the crowd as Angela entered. She walked slowly, her hands gripping the edge of the podium to steady herself. The flashes of cameras nearly blinded her, but she forced herself to look up. "My name is Angela Price," she began, her voice shaking. "I'm the woman from that flight." The room grew still. "I want to say something, not because I was told to, not because I want sympathy, but because the world saw me at my worst. And I can't let that be the only thing they remember." Her throat tightened, but she pressed on. "What I said on that plane came from a place of arrogance and prejudice. I didn't just embarrass myself. I disrespected another human being, a man who showed more dignity in silence than I did in words. Marcus didn't deserve that. Nobody does." The cameras clicked rapidly, capturing every tear that slipped down her cheek. I can't erase what I did. I can't erase how people feel when they watch that video. But I can say this: I am sorry. To Marcus, to every passenger on that plane, and anyone who has ever been judged for the color of their skin. I failed, and I'm standing here because I don't want to keep failing. Her voice cracked, but she kept her eyes forward. I don't ask for forgiveness. I ask for the chance to change, and to prove it, not just with words, but with action. She stepped away from the podium, leaving a stunned silence behind her. Meanwhile, across town, Marcus watched the press conference on a muted television in the community center office. His friends and volunteers filled the room, murmuring reactions. "She's just trying to save herself," one of them said. "Yeah, too late for apologies," another added. Marcus didn't speak right away. He studied Angela's face on the screen, the tremor in her voice, the tears, the weight she seemed to carry. Finally, he said quietly, "People can change, but only if they choose to." The room fell silent, watching him. "Do you believe her?" someone asked. Marcus didn't answer immediately. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "I believe she's scared, but I also believe she's at a crossroads. The question isn't whether she's sorry. The question is what she does next." A week later, the airline organized a roundtable discussion on race, respect, and travel. They invited Marcus to speak. To everyone's surprise, Angela was also on the list. The tension in the room was thick as they sat across from each other, cameras rolling. The moderator introduced them, then asked the first question. "Marcus, when you see Angela here today, what goes through your mind?" Marcus leaned toward the microphone. "I see a reminder of how far we have to go, but also a chance to show what accountability looks like. Not everyone who makes a mistake gets a chance to face it head on. She has one. Let's see what she does with it." The moderator turned to Angela. "And you? Why did you agree to be here?" Angela's voice was steadier this time. "Because running away won't fix anything. I disrespected Marcus in front of the world. The least I can do is face the world with him sitting across from me." The dialogue went back and forth, sometimes tense, sometimes hopeful. Marcus spoke about the pain of constant judgment. Angela admitted to blind prejudice she hadn't even realized she carried. The cameras captured it all: the honesty, the discomfort, the rawness. When it ended, the room erupted in applause. Not because the story was resolved, but because the conversation had finally begun. That night, Angela walked out of the building into the cool air, reporters still chasing her for comments. She didn't give them any. For the first time in weeks, she felt lighter, not because the world forgave her, but because she had stopped running. Across the lot, Marcus was talking with his team. He spotted Angela, and for a moment, their eyes met. He gave her a small nod, not forgiveness, not friendship, but acknowledgement, a signal that her words had reached him, even if just a little. Angela returned the nod, her chest tightening. It wasn't redemption, but it was a start. Months later, the story had moved from headlines to history. The video still existed, still sparked debates online, but it was no longer just about shame. It had become a conversation starter in schools, workshops, and forums. Marcus continued speaking at events, his influence growing, his story inspiring thousands. Angela, meanwhile, volunteered quietly at community programs, often without cameras or reporters. She worked with people she once might have judged, listening more than she spoke. The scars of that flight remained for both of them, but they had turned those scars into something more than pain. They had turned them into proof. Proof that confrontation could become conversation. Proof that shame could become accountability. And proof that even when the world shakes you to your core, what you choose next defines the story people remember. The pilot's announcement on that plane had left Angela shaking, but it was not his words alone. It was the weight of truth. That dignity is louder than prejudice, and silence can speak louder than rage. For Marcus, the flight had been just another moment in a long journey. For Angela, it had been the moment her life cracked open, forcing her to face what lay inside. Neither of them would forget it, and neither would anyone who would watch the story unfold. If you like this story, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Also and other to strengthen our community. Let us know in the comments where you are watching from and what time you are currently watching this video.